mean, I haven't said
But it wasn't arbitrary. It's not like you had a gut feeling that 166 was just wrong.
Right.
It's that you understand the consequences of going that fast. That the potential harm increases dramatically as you begin to speed up.
Right. So the question I'm asking is, 65 is what the local society came to agreement upon.
Yep.
What do you call that evaluation that I did that determined that 66 was still okay? Because that's what I consider internal.
Degrees, you know.
It's
66 not that far over from 65.
But that's when you go, the more you pay for
Right, that's those are the details of the comment I made. What I'm actually asking is, you define internal as internal to the group. I'm asking what do you define internal to the individual?
the question that I have regarding that is that when you say that you determined that, for example, 66 is okay, if you get pulled over for doing 66, are you going to acknowledge that you were breaking the law and take the ticket?
Yes.
Okay. Then you already acknowledged this societal thing, and you have a different view, and you're going to push the boundary a little bit. I don't even know that this is a moral question. You recognize that it's like, see, speeding is the example I would have used to explain this better, and you stolen that opportunity. I don't know what I would call it. You're asking what I would call it. I don't know that I would actually consider it any kind of moral evaluation.
I guess I'm just saying that from my understanding of what you said, you were defining the establishment of that 65 speed limit as an internal situation, based on the way you define internal and external. And I'm asking
if we
for
were
a
looking at
definition
speed limits as
a value system that's established in actuality within the individual, what do you call that? If that's internal, then what's me saying?
well, I'm talking about internal within the system, and you're talking about internal within yourself. It's just your personal take of it. I have my own personal take that disagrees with a number of positions that the society that I live in has adopted. I can work to change those in the areas where I think that they're dramatically wrong, but I may be forever in the minority. I may be, people, we go back to, I use this example, I guess, because some friends of mine are in this position. There are plenty of people who would advocate legalization of marijuana. Currently it's illegal. And there are plenty of people who say you've given no good reason for this to be illegal and for something else to be legal. For example, comparing marijuana and alcohol. And those people have their own personal take on it, which may eventually become the de facto standard. If enough people think that 66 is safe enough, and we look at the studies and we say, you know what, when we let people drive 66, it's really not any worse, then it becomes the new de facto standard. It's the way things change. And so when you look around it, it's not that we have to go for a happy medium or even necessarily a consensus, although consensus does tend to drive. Your personal view on it can be dramatically different, and you are doing what we all do, sacrificing some personal liberty, your ability to go 75 or 80, in order to live in a society that protects your interests. I don't know what else you would call it other than just your personal evaluation. I don't know that it has any moral onus on it.
I just feel like there's an obvious paradox that arises when you consider that these are all, like, this can vary from spot to spot, And I remember being, 18 years old, I remember being 17 years old and dating my girlfriend and my birthday coming, and the next day it was a crime. And I just kept thinking, like, this makes no sense. But it's what this local society has established as rule. Yeah. And I'm sure I could find a parent who could make an argument that it's 100% the wrong and right or black and white.
And there are really exceptions. There are, I mean, this is what I was talking about when I said you're not going to find a one-size-fits-all answer. And so in some cases you do go with a happy medium, and in other cases you go with whichever one has the loudest voice. And it doesn't make it morally right at all. When we're talking about the actual rules that govern what we can and can't do, you're not necessarily talking about what we consider moral. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that there's a difference between laws and morals. Laws may be based on morals, but they don't always perfectly embody morals, because morals are kind of squishy and gray. And I think the fact that when you said am I immoral if I go 66? Most people in here went like, no. Shows that this is not internal to you. If we all turned to you and went, oh my God, you went 66! I can't believe it. We all freaked out. You'd suddenly start going, well, gee, maybe I should rethink that. Because everyone you knew around you was saying that you were doing something horrible.
But he didn't tell you
But
that
we
he
did.
was doing it at 20.
So I guess I'm just saying that, like, this is not internal to you. We're all in agreement. In other words, you are going with the general flow of society.
Well, I guess the point I'm making is whether we're in agreement or not doesn't determine whether it's internal to me or not. It just happens to be in sync. And like to me, all law is, or I'm sorry, the only time I'm not breaking the law is when what I feel like doing and what someone else has established I should do just happen to sync up. And when they don't, I'm committing a crime. And when they do, I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Because he made that decision to go 66 without knowing what anybody else
Because
did.
based on
I
what-
actually don't think he did.
But based on what you're saying, like we all live in an obviously majority Christian society, so there is a large part of the population that's looking at all of us and saying, "Oh God, like you people are not abiding by the obvious truth." Like that influence is there, and we're still sitting here feeling within moral correctness.
Yeah, I mean, I think that shows there's a lot of room for flexibility.
I'm going to jump in for a second and give a friend of mine the last word, or nearly the last word, because we need to be down by 5:30 and it's almost 4:30 and I don't want any traffic problems. So Schilling.
Well, yeah, I have a question kind of related to that, partially because my sort of disagreement there. I would say that it's definitely internal for the governed population, but for the individual, for me, I consider myself amoral. I don't consider my internal decisions to be moral in any respect, or immoral in any respect. But I'm part of the governed populace, so the society has determined a moral structure within which I have to live, and that gives influence on me in how to choose my behavior, whether it will be beneficial to me or detrimental to me. So the going 66 would be my acceptance of the risks and the benefits based on the morality that the governed population has developed internally. So my question for Matt...
It's a pragmatic, amoral position on your part.
Right. My question to you would be, would you consider any single individual's personal choices to be moral-based or based on benefit and detriment in relation to the moral standards they live in as part of the government populace? Like, would the word moral even apply to the individual choice?
It would to me,
Okay.
because I don't care whether it's ultimately pragmatic or what they would consider it. I'm the person who's going to make a moral assessment of it. And while, in many cases, the moral assessment may be neutral. For example, I don't know your name. Devlon, that's right. We've met before. My moral assessment of his driving 66 is that in 99% of the cases it's morally neutral. I couldn't care less. Now, if he was doing it in a 20 or in a school zone, or on a motorcycle, even in and out of traffic that was going a lot slower, obviously I think he's taking a risk that I would consider to have moral implications, because he's showing reckless disregard for not only his own life, but the life of others, which I think is where we get into kind of moral responsibilities. But it doesn't matter to me what his motivation is, I'm still making a moral assessment. And I'm fine with somebody else saying they're not making a moral assessment, as long as we can get down to the brass tacks of how are we going to live. And I think that the best way, the secular moral system, or the secular evaluation of anything, is going to give us the best benefit for how we live. Yeah, last question.
I misunderstand. It sounded like to me you were saying that his decision to do something which might endanger him and him alone is immoral.
Not like that. Not in the sense that he's only showing disregard for his own health. I think there are some cases, there are some situations where we can look at it that way. My concern, for example, we looked at helmet laws before. We talked about helmet laws a lot, and by and large, the guys who don't, that don't want to wear helmets and say that this is none of your business. If I crash, that's fine. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with assisted suicide, euthanasia things. But we also have a responsibility to people to make sure that they're protected to some extent from themselves. I think this is my personal take on it. Because we know that depression passes.
So you're going to externally imposed.
We already do externally imposed.
You
We lock
personally have
people,
chosen.
we lock people up, but we do it in the extremes. But when I was talking about his thing, by and large, and my thing with the helmet law, is that I think if you're going to have a law that nobody has to wear helmets, then anybody, if they don't have to wear a helmet on a motorcycle, when there's a demonstrated cost to this, is that if you're on a motorcycle and you crash and you wind up in hospital, you are entirely responsible for your hospital bills. But the rest of us shouldn't have to pay simply for something that you chose to do, because now it's no longer affecting you, it's affecting everybody else. And that is one of the things that I keep harping on, because people ask, why are you so concerned about people's beliefs? Because beliefs matter. They inform actions, they inform that they control what decisions you make, and those actions have consequences, and none of us live in a vacuum, which means every action I take, it can potentially affect lots of different people. Even if I think it's
You need to lose weight then, because it's costing society money.
I know.
And the government has the right to impose that on you. Perhaps even the moral obligation to do so.
I would
And in that
argue,
case, I would have to severely disagree with you.
I would argue that there's a good reason to revisit what sort of medical benefits we allow people based on the actions that they take. I would have to concede that there may be some necessary action in that area.
So a rich person is free to risk his life or be fat, but a poor person is not, even if he can afford his own insurance.
If they can afford their own, if you can afford your own, you're good.
Except that many people will argue that, yes, but by you risking your body, it's going to make my insurance premiums as part of the pool go up. You could expand this thing and follow it to logical conclusions where you can't do anything.
Sure, and you can also draw a causal chain back to my great-great-grandfather. But we tend to look at things with regard to their proximity, and so there's a field of effect that any given action can have. For example, when I'm driving down to the Backers here in a little bit, I might take an action that forces somebody else to hit their brakes, which forces somebody else to hit their brakes, and 20 or 30 cars down the line, they have an accident because somebody else, there are other factors regarding how other people pay attention, etc. Am I responsible for all that? No. The identifying cause of an effect needs to be both necessary and sufficient and proximate. And so I think we can identify a field of influence for any given action. And so I think that part of what you're saying, and I agree, you can't follow these things down a slippery slope, otherwise you're never going to you're going to have imposition even when your system says you shouldn't. So that I now that I've ended on something that I wasn't going to end on. I was going to avoid specifics.